What's going on? Is it on? It died. Yeah, I can do that. Which one is? Okay, so as it was pointed out earlier, there is a need for mathematics in the corporate world, and you've seen some data from the SIME report in 2012. Several of us here in this room were on the committee that drafted that report. And so there are 18 case studies in that report of how mathematics is being used in industry. And there are emerging areas like business analytics and math finance and systems biology.
Translation is being distributed.
Okay, excellent. But also there are the traditional industries, manufacturing, oil, computer systems. It's interesting that computers are nowadays the traditional industries, software and IT. So there's a need for students to be educated to become successful professionals in the changing society. And if you look at the data from the AMS report on new doctoral recipients, in 2012-2013, 35% of the doctoral recipients in the US were employed by business, industry, and government, and 14% outside mathematical sciences, mostly in medical sciences, because this was also including statistics in here. So WPI is in Worcester, Massachusetts. Worcester is somewhere near Boston. And not far from New York. It is a small private technological universities. We have 3,800 undergraduates, 1,500 graduate students, and 300 or 400 faculty, depending on how things are counted. And the idea of this university, when it was established in the mid-1800s, was to serve the workforce needs of central Massachusetts, where that was mostly an industrial area. And so the industrialists needed workforce. And in 1865, when it was founded, the motto was theory and practice. And it was in German because at that time, the German engineering universities were very famous and very visible. In the 70s, the professors at WPI came up with a plan, the so-called WPI plan, where the undergraduates had to do a humanities and arts requirement, no matter what major they had. If they're engineers or in sciences, they had to have some courses in humanities and arts, so that they could write well. Engineers need to write well. They had to have a junior year project that was focused on the impact of technology on society, so that they would understand what the impact of what they were designing on society is. And then a senior year project that is in their major field of study. And at that time, the engineering departments mostly were working with industry. And in the 1990s, we decided as a math department to also look at starting to work with industry. And at that time, in Minnesota, they were putting together some workshops like this one here on how to work with industry and how to connect math departments with industry, and Avner Friedman was organizing one of these workshops. I went to that workshop and then went back to Worcester and started a Center for Industrial Mathematics and Statistics. So these workshops are useful So why industrial projects? Because it provides students with an experience in interdisciplinary learning, in problem formulation, in teamwork, critical thinking. They get experience in writing and communication skills. It challenges students because it's usually an open-ended problem. It doesn't have the solution at the end of the book. It has an impact that homework usually doesn't have on students. And students are happy because companies need their results to take a decision. So it gives students an experience before actually they go and get a job, so they can make mistakes if they know, and they're not really penalized for that. And they can understand if they like this area of activity or not. So they have an experience before they make an important decision in their careers. So it started in 1997, the Center for Industrial Mathematics and Statistics, and it was conceived as the link in mathematics between the university and industry. And today to have over 150 undergraduate and graduate projects with more than 70 companies and more than 20 faculty who advised these projects. So we have projects in different areas and we integrated them vertically. We started with undergraduate projects, senior year projects, and also we have RU projects. RU stands for Research Experience for Undergraduates. This is something that the National Science Foundation is funding. So we bring in undergraduates in the summer for 2 months from other universities to work with us with industry on projects. So we're working with our own students during the year, and in the summer we bring students from other universities to do the same thing. This was funded by, these activities are funded by WPI, by the National Science Foundation, and by the Department of Defense. Then we decided to start some master's programs called Professional Science Master's Programs, which are mostly terminal degrees, so students get a master's and then they go and work in industry. And there are projects and theses that are connected to industry. We then went to the PhD level and we integrated this in the PhD requirements, and we had students who did projects with companies either as part of the PhD requirements or as internships during the summer, and I'll talk in the second panel about that, I think. And then for faculty, we have math in industry workshops. We organized one that was actually organized by SIAM in '98, that was immediately after we started the center. We are part of the study groups, the math problems for industry study groups, and we'll talk later about that, I think. And also, faculty, out of these projects, there are sometimes consulting opportunities for faculty, and faculty do consulting. And then we went back to the bottom of the pyramid and decided to also involve teachers in these types of activities, and trying to make teachers understand how mathematics is being used in the real world so that they can answer questions when students ask, why do we need to learn matrices, or why do we need to invert matrices, so that they have an answer of where it's being used. So what we did, we did these workshops with teachers that were funded by SIAM, by the General Electric Foundation, by ExxonMobil, by Toyota, and we're running these in the summers, bringing in mathematicians from industry to talk about how they use mathematics, and then we're giving teachers some mini projects to develop for their own students and take them back to the classroom, and then there was a follow-up session in the spring to see how things have worked. So what kind of projects do we have? We have projects in actuarial mathematics. We have a number of students. Half of our undergraduate students are actuaries. So we worked with lots of insurance companies. We are also positioned very well because near Worcester between Boston and Hartford, there are most of the insurance companies in the US. And so we worked with most of them. There are some examples of titles of projects that we did for insurance companies. Mathematical modeling, we worked with companies like Bose, General Dynamics, Morgan, that was acquired by Siemens, Decca, you know, the Segway that is designed by Decca. We actually worked on the Segway at the time when the Segway was not public, and they were telling us that we were working on something else, and actually 2 years later we figured out that what we did was to design some of the controls on the Segway. Ferrite, which is a microwave company. Math finance, we have a master's in financial mathematics, so we are working with, we even work with Goldman Sachs and many other financial companies, smaller or larger. We have some applied statistics projects, and we worked with Videroot, MCI, Pfizer, CDC, and so on. Also with a very small funeral home. And the title of the project was very euphemistically said. It was Study of Consumer Demand in the Next 10 Years. Consumer demand meaning, yeah. So how do you establish contacts with industry? Well, friends, strangers, you talk to everybody. Alumni, trustees of the university, the Career Development Center, the Corporate Relations Office. There are all sorts of offices in a university that connect with the outside world. Maintaining contacts means making many phone calls, site visit, going to lunch, going to golf. And then connecting people with the faculty that have the appropriate expertise. Once you set a connection to a company, you need to actually bring in someone who knows exactly what the problem is and is the expert in that. So we are helping companies address their needs for mathematical solutions. Companies are interested in doing that because they are interested in the problem, but also interested in being part of the educational process, interested in having an opportunity to identify and help train potential future employees. It costs them less if they work with our students at the university than if they hire them and then they realize that they shouldn't have hired them. Challenges, sometimes companies are too busy. Sometimes the mathematical content is either too high or too low. Sometimes the alignment of the timetables between universities and companies is not right. You have to get the right students. There's competition with the internships. You have to talk about financial support. And sometimes faculty are not interested because it doesn't fit with their research thing. You have to discuss legal issues and confidentiality, intellectual property. We've got lots of press coverage, and we are down there and not up there. So we are saving the world. Thank you.
Time for one question? Any question right at the moment? Okay. Next up is Carlos Tolmasky from IMA, University of Minnesota.
This is not working, so this is not working. Does this work? Oh, yeah. So this is, okay.
Yeah, I'm Carlos Tolmasky. I'm Associate Director for Industrial Programs at the IMA. And this is the mission statement of the IMA. The IMA is NSF-funded Institute of Mathematics and its applications, connects scientists, engineers, and mathematicians in order to address scientific and technological challenges in a collaborative, engaging environment, developing transformative new mathematics and exploring its applications while training the next generation of research and educators. So this is a general mission statement, and essentially the IMA has two tracks. I would say the main track is the annual program. The annual program is the IMA picks a topic per year, and it develops from there a variety of workshops. Visitors spend months, weeks, or their sabbaticals at the IMA, and there is a lot of activity revolving around this annual program. On a parallel track, there is the industrial activities. The IMA has been at the forefront of the relationship between academia and industry in mathematics, and when I was listening this morning some of the presentations in talking about how we do this at the IMA and what NIMS is trying to do here, I was thinking we are doing quite a lot of stuff, but we need to do a lot more. So I fairly recently joined the IMA, and my effort is to try to merge these two worlds and try to make it like, not the same, but a path that can go back and forth. So the industrial program at the IMA tries to act as a bridge between the academic and industrial mathematicians in order to address scientific and technological challenges. In order to do this, we have a variety, I would say a menu of different activities that we run. That I would like to think that is a whole program in which we are linking the industrial and the academic world at every level of our scientific lives. Students, grad students, postdoctoral fellows, faculty members, industrial scientists. So in thinking about this, one day I started thinking that I would like to have a visual picture of that. And I tried to draw this visual picture of our program, and I thought I got a great thing until I talked to Fadil. I realized there wasn't such a great thing, so we started working on a new one. And this is where I'm working with my visual picture of what we are trying to do. We are trying to have a lot of different activities to engage all the community, all of our community. So in blue there you see all the stuff that is tailored to students. In red, all the stuff that is tailored to postdocs. In green for faculty, and in red for industrial scientists. Each of their activities involves either 1, 2, or 3 of these different stages at which we are at. So for example, let me pick one of their math modeling in industry. So the IMA has been running these workshops for a number of years in which grad students are presented problems from people in the industry, from industrial scientists, and they work in groups in order to find a solution during the span of 10 days. The landmark, I would say, the main of the activities that the IMA has in terms of industrial work is the industrial postdoctoral program. So it started in '89, and postdocs spend half of the time at a company, half of the time at the IMA. They work in a project for the company. And invariable, all the industries we have relationships with, which participate in this program, they say that industrial program is where they get the most value from. And I think it's true also for former postdocs. We'll say that. So we try to build our program around this. This is our main activity to connect these two worlds. So I want to point out a couple more of these activities that we have. One is the one that I referred to before for grad students, the math modeling workshop. If you, any of these things, if you have any questions, we have a lot of examples of people here that have been working with these workshops in the past. So you can asked us and asked them. Rich has organized a bunch of them. Tom participated in a number of them. There are former industrial postdocs. A new one that happened last year for the first time, very similar to this workshop, industrial career workshop, in which we try to educate grad students, postdocs, on how to look at problems in the industry to see if they want to work in this different career that the traditional academic work. But also we would like to bring this education to faculty to prepare students to have industrial careers and not just academic career as the only option. So in a way, my goal, or I would say our goal, should be to try to make these two worlds talk to each other so much that they look at each other not as different worlds, but just different stages and different careers that we can take. And we are all here to solve problems with our math skills. So we leave questions for later, right? Huh?
Is there a quick question now?
How do you encourage the companies to participate in your industrial programs?
Well, Bogdan said it. I talk to strangers.
It's very hard.
It is a challenge, right? It is a challenge. I mean, you got to talk to a lot of people. I mean, I feel myself, I have a lot of learning to do on this, because these people in industry are generally busy. If they are not, they pretend to be busy. And so you send an email and you don't get anything back. You need to go back, and then you need to. But the good side, one thing I found out is that the good side is that a lot of these people, they're just like us, right? Us. I used to be in the industry. I'm calling myself an academic now, very quickly. But I mean, there are people that have an appreciation for what mathematicians can do, what problems can be solved. So, in general, I tend to think that the challenge, the hard part, doesn't come from the person itself, but from the surrounding area. What you have to overcome at an industrial level to be able to have time to participate in workshops, to justify the presence of a postdoc, to make sure that value is being added. So it's a constant work. Yeah, I don't have magic.
I can tell you how we started the first projects. Once you start, it's easy, but no, it's difficult to start. First thing, we went to the office that is tracking where former students are, which is for the alumni, right? And we said we want some names of people who work in companies, and they gave us 10 names of people who are managers and so on. And we went to the first. We said no. We wanted to get 2 projects, so we said no. 10 companies is good. We'll go to 10 and we'll get 2 projects. We went to the first 2 companies. We got 1 project from each, and then we stopped because we didn't know if we have enough students to do these projects. So now you have to start. But and then someone had a neighbor, and I was flying with someone on the plane and noticed that it was from a company and talked to a stranger. So slowly you get the ball rolling.
Yeah.
We'll come back to this point, for sure.
Oh, I think we'll just continue with it. I mean, I've already talked to you about the Boeing company. So let me just talk a little bit about academic collaboration. I think this question that you asked is one of the single hardest ones to answer. I mean, and kind of the story that goes along with it. There is this guy out in the woods in the Pacific Northwest. The trees are 10 meters across. And he's swinging an axe, trying to take a tree down. And this fellow comes up and taps him on the shoulder. And I've got this chainsaw here that you might find. No, I'm too busy. You got to leave me. And it's really hard to get the attention of the people who perhaps can benefit, because you're too busy doing things in some other way. And it's sometimes getting the realization that that we aren't talking about incremental improvements, but big leaps forward in technology is such a hard thing. The other thing I would really like to focus on here is that the benefits that accrue to industry go way beyond just simple mathematical solutions to math problems that arise. I like to think of it in terms of conduits of all kinds of things. One of them is, the single biggest one is access to students and access to fresh young talent. That really is the single greatest thing that these kinds of collaborations supply. And but there are all kinds of other things too. I mean, I know in my own case, I don't get to spend much time on college campuses, and every time I visit one, it is, I mean, you just feel this load being lifted simply just because the atmosphere is so different, and it's so youthful and so exciting, and so it seems that it makes the world seem full of rich opportunities. So I mean, all these other benefits aside, I like to participate in collaborations just for that reason. Typically, when I go to say a professional society meeting or a conference, I like to apply the one idea rule. If I can spend an entire week at a SIAM conference or a math workshop or something, if there's even one small idea that I can go back to my job with, that maybe I can implement, or maybe I can sneak into some project or program or activity that it's been worth the whole week just for that one new idea. And after following all of this, it's fun to watch these ideas take on a life of their own and find their way. So I don't have anything more to say. I can answer questions about Boeing or collaboration or anything.
Questions about anything? Any quick questions at the moment? Tom? Okay, so later. I'm sure you'll get some later. Okay, can I get a little, I put this up here? Okay, I have a few slides that I'm going to use too. So what I'd like to focus on is the workshop aspect of interactions between academics and industry. So, okay, so I wanted to start with a little bit about myself and a little bit about Delaware, since I doubt many of you know about Delaware. So I started out as a mechanical engineer with a bachelor's. I went to work at Hewlett-Packard and worked as an engineer and finished a master's part-time in engineering. Then promptly turned around and went back and got a PhD in applied math. So then I did a postdoc in government for 4 years at an institute much like NIMS. And then I went to work at the University of Delaware for the last 20 or so years. So, yeah, good. And so last year I did something a little bit different. I joined the IMA for a year to be an associate director, which is a very good experience for me. And now I'm back at Delaware. And so Delaware's on the Atlantic coast, right in the middle, essentially. We're a medium-sized university. We are a research university. Our math department is also sort of medium-sized, I would say. We have about 45 faculty. We have a number of non-tenure track faculty. And a rapidly growing number of undergrad majors, because we keep adding majors of different flavors, like quantitative biology, which is about a third math, a third biology, and a third chemistry. So we do things a little bit differently at that level. And it helps open the door to these kind of interactions, I think, quite a bit. So, yeah, and so we've put some grads at what I think are good places. So, okay, so, good. Okay, so one of the things that Delaware's been doing for a while is helping to run a series of workshops that are 1 week in duration. They're modeled after Oxford study groups. We do this in cooperation with WPI, where Bogdan is. They've also been at New Jersey Institute of Technology recently, and RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnic. So it rotates around these different universities, and many hands make light work. right? So this makes it a lot easier. No one place is burdened every year. Okay, so someone like Tom shows up on Monday. He describes the problem, and an ad hoc teams form. So people just pick their poison. They do their own the problem they want, and they work during the week. And then on Friday they present a summary of whatever they got done, and a report gets written for the industrial participant. It's very fast. It's better at idea generation than writing code, say. Writing code in 3 days, doesn't happen too often. So, if this, this style of workshop is, it's all over Europe now, so called European Study Groups with Industry. It started at Oxford for many years, and they started rotating it around. So it's been at, I don't know, at least 20 different European universities easily. And sort of every other one is in the UK, and the other one is on continental Europe. So, and they've been around the world, actually. So this massandindustry.org site lists many of them. So there have been some here. There was a related workshop in Korea in 2003, though not exactly this style. Now, one thing that we've added, sort of recently, is that a few years back, PIMS had a warm-up camp before a study group kind of workshop where students could go and get a few days or a week of experience first. So we've copied them, we flattered them by imitating them. And so this works really well. If you have students who are a little bit timid, so this study group format uses faculty, postdocs, and students all just get in there and work with people. Tends to be loud, tends to be people criticize each other, and students often shrink into a corner and don't want to be seen in this kind of situation. It's like parents fighting. And so a way to combat that is to get the students together for a while, get a little experience. They get to know each other a little. They're far more outgoing when they come to this camp, right? So this is something that all of you could do here. All the academics could instigate this kind of activity with industry, get them to bring a problem that they need. If they're looking, particularly if they're looking for ideas, what might I do a little differently? You can do this kind of thing. You can also recruit people with expertise. Maybe your department doesn't have someone in a problem you want to work on, but you can call your friends at other universities and have them come over and help you, right? And it might be the start of consulting activity or longer-term collaboration. It also tends to end up with hiring. So, for example, one of the industrial speakers we have here from Gore has hired people as a result of this style of workshop. So it happens. And this is getting a little bit repetitive. There are some variations on this, of course. So the IMA, as Carlos mentioned, and also SAMC at North Carolina State run 10-day workshops that are for grad student teams only. And the grad students are pre-assigned, and then they work on that industrial, and say, for example, Tom brings a problem, he gets students for 10 days. He may find a student he likes and wants to hire, and so forth. So, but he also gets, it tends to get a more, well, it depends on the problem, but you can get a more complete solution in that environment. Sometimes companies have organized their own workshops. So recently, Paul Corporation did this, Schlumberger did this. It's less than 10 years ago, but it's probably more than 5 now. I'm really unreliable about the past. So, but they brought people in, typically for about 3 days. They just pulled in a bunch of academics by invitation, and they just said, give us ideas. Just generate ideas. We'll write them down and write a report on what you thought about it. So all these things are options. So I guess my main point here is that any one of these things you can help happen, right? You can help form these workshops, recruit people to be in them, and not every company wants the same thing. So someone may not want to go to some place for 10 days. Maybe having people in for 3 days is much better for them. So if you're willing to be a little bit flexible and trying to identify these people and work with them in different formats, there's definitely things you can do. Okay, that's all I had to say. Okay, are there any questions? Richard.
So we heard several times this morning about the importance of the annotation
I'll take one shot at it. So, well, encouraging classes outside the math department is one. So people learn some jargon. They should learn programming. I mean, that's a very clear message. And there was a clear message about stat in some areas, certainly. So the kind of courses they take is one thing. We found that students doing these workshops, probably everyone here actually would say that opens their minds a little bit. It's not about getting the perfect answer in as much time as I want to take, like a thesis, but what can you do in a week, or what can you do in a fixed amount of time? So those kind of experiences also seem pretty useful, I would say. And I would say project work is another one, just as much project work, learn by doing, essentially.
So most of these industrial projects involve presentations to the sponsors. So the presentations to the sponsors, which are every 2 weeks, either on conference or at the site of the sponsor. So it's something that teaches students how to present. We also have competition on elevation for non-professionals. So how to describe your research to someone who's not in your area. They have 2 minutes. A little bit longer than the speech. And surprisingly, when we started this 4 years ago, students really had problems doing that. Now they're getting better because they learn from the previous we also have to present in the environment. So there are also presentation skills for the master's students, we actually have a professional skills seminar that involves presentation.
Can you hear? So follow up to Richard's question. You described this morning. That you have a geographic problem. I'm going to go into become my own. So do you ever run into situations where you had to change those behaviors once they were at work? So somebody's there and they have this tendency and you need to change that. So what would be
A lot of the time, it's a question of really figuring out how to arrange work packages to take advantage of what it is that people can and will do. And there are some people that these behaviors simply won't ever change. So it's a question in those cases of having some of the technical leaders, say in the math organization, actually carve out work packages and say, here, you go back to your hole for a month or 2 months and take care of this. One of my colleagues talks about the groups of people in the organization for whom it's safe to let them be seen in public. And those are the people that focus on introducing to the customers and developing a network of contacts. And in the long run, of course, those are the people who are so much more valuable to the organization. I think before we go on, Albert, do you have any comments? I know you have dealt with this problem all along. So
I fully agree with you. That's in industry, that's definitely a job of the bosses to make sure that everybody contributes in his best way. Yeah. And if he contributes by going away and dealing with his problem, you only have to make sure that he comes back with a solution just at the time it's needed. So in
do you deal with the IP issues and the intellectual property?
Okay. I don't know anything about Korean intellectual property law, so I can tell you how it works in the U.S. for an American company. At Boeing Company, IP issues tend to be handled in one of four different ways. If somebody in the company has an idea that looks promising or interesting, he's encouraged to fill out an invention disclosure, which there's some work involved in filling one of these things out. You can't do it in 5 minutes, but in some cases it doesn't take more than an hour or two to file an invention disclosure. And it gets turned over to the Boeing Intellectual Property Management Organization. And they're going to decide to do one of four things with this idea. One is they're going to decide to pursue patent protection so that the Boeing company owns the intellectual property. But it is still nevertheless visible to the rest of the world. So it's a public declaration. We've had this idea. It's ours. If you want to make use of this idea, you're going to pay us for it or make some other kind of arrangement. A second thing that can happen is the company just says, this is a really valuable idea. We're going to hold it as a trade secret, and nobody's going to know about this. So we're just going to protect it by making sure that nobody finds out about it. A third thing that can happen is something that's called defensive publication. And the idea there is to take the idea, develop it into an article, a professional article, and publish it in the scientific literature before anybody else has an opportunity to patent the idea. That destroys the intellectual property value of the whole thing, but it protects a company from having had the idea, having started to use the idea, and then have somebody else go off and patent the thing. Then the fourth thing is the intellectual property management organization comes back and says, this is such a bad idea that nobody would ever be interested in it. We're just going to forget about the whole thing. And in terms of collaboration between academia and industry, two of these things at least work really, really well. I know I talked a little bit this morning about Design Explorer. The way Boeing handled Design Explorer intellectual property was through defensive publication. A lot of that technology had been developed in collaboration with John Dennis and some other faculty members at Rice University and some of John's students. And so as the technology was developed, a whole series of papers on that technology was published. And so that worked really well. The company's interests have been protected even if specific ownership of the IP hasn't been. And the other thing that works really well is for the intellectual property management organization to decide that it's just a bad idea. They may or may not be right, but at least the ideas can be discussed and published, and anything can be done with them. Sometimes I know that we've done this not in math, but in some of the engineering groups with MIT. Arrangements can be put in place for joint patent protection. So of the four means of handling intellectual property, at least 2.5 of them are amenable to coming out with some kind of accommodation that enables the collaboration to go forward. The one thing that really is the kiss of death in terms of collaboration is the trade secret. And at least from the industrial researcher side, I know this is true at Boeing, I suspect it's true almost everywhere else also, is that the intellectual, if it really makes sense to protect things as trade secrets, okay, but I think rarely do you find that that's the case? When I was in graduate school, I had a little consulting gig with a mortgage insurance company that had declared Newton's method for solving one equation with one variable, a proprietary trade secret. So I've seen cases where trade secrets are declared not because you're protecting a really good idea, but because you don't want the rest of the world to know how stupid the thing that you're actually doing is solving. So the whole trade secret thing, I think, can be managed, and I think it's possible almost all the time to find productive ways of letting collaboration go forward.
Maybe they want to comment on that topic?
I guess I have a question related. So let's say this applies to both the academic design and industrial design. When we talk about industrial problems, I think we can probably talk about toy problems and serious problems. I mean, many big corporations have an army of in-house researchers, and my suspicion is they probably would want to work on the serious problems, and would probably give up toy problems to, let's say, for students or faculty to work on these occasions. Or is that the case? Or do you actually have some serious problems that you actually give to
I guess I'm guilty of passing out toy problems a lot of the time. Because for me the single biggest payoff really is in talent identification, discovery, and recruiting. So for those things, the toy problems enable you to get to accomplish what's necessary. I mean, I do remember going to one of these IMA workshops, and I brought a real problem, at least on one of the 6 occasions I did this. And at the end of the 10 days, the students were so frustrated at the inability to make meaningful progress in this real research problem. I vowed I was never going to do it again. In terms of technology development, I didn't get anything out of it. The company didn't get anything out of it, and it just left the students frustrated. So I've tended to make these things. And when you say toy problems, they aren't necessarily things that I necessarily know the answers to. The last time I did this workshop, it was kind of a toy problem. But the students came up with this whole new twist on calculus of variations, at least applied to that problem, that I hadn't really seen before. And while the research that they did wasn't exactly original, the paper that they wrote was this beautiful summary of everything that had been done on this particular problem ever. And it really made this very nice survey article of a sort that I hadn't seen in the literature anywhere else. So those kinds of things can be really valuable.
Right. So I guess
it really depends on the size of the company. So if it's Boeing, it's one thing. A smaller company might not have the resources like that. Might not have the time to do it, even if they have the resources. Might want the students to do something which is a warm-up to a problem that they will start later on. So it's on a case-by-case basis.
That's a very good point. I mean, I know one case, there's a small company in Seattle called K2 Engineering that designs skis for alpine skiing. And they needed somebody to perform a finite element analysis of the structure. Well, there wasn't anybody in their company capable of doing that. And that was a case where you really could get something meaningful on one of these exercises.
So, I mean, for example, in WPI, like there are workshops for students. I mean, so when you give these industrial problems to the students to work on,
do you do it with the expectation that the result will be actually used for meaningful purpose, or do you actually do it mainly to actually train the students?
Both. So first of all, we don't take projects that are not paid for by the companies, because we don't. The fact that the company is paying, even if it's not paying too much, it's a symbol of the fact that they are interested in the problem, that actually they are going to spend time with us and the students to answer questions, because no, actually their time is more expensive than the money that they're paying us. And so, of course, it is an educational thing, not only research. So now we tell companies from the beginning that now we hope that the problem will be solved by the end of the project, but maybe not, because we also have to instruct students and not only solve the problem. So sometimes no. On the other hand, no, the company has to be happy because you want them to come back. No, if you saw, we had 70 companies on 150 projects, so it means that we got several projects from the same companies.
Yeah, it's true that as Thomas said, that even 10 days is frustrating for problem difficult. So the time window is critical. We're giving 6 months versus 10 days, big difference. So you have to be able to have a problem tailored to the length of time that it can be tackled. So very often when you say that the company has a lot of researcher already, well, they have spent already maybe years working on something, so they're not going to expect somebody in 10 days to do what they have, with many teams trying to solve before. So it's, I think it's more appropriate for small companies to work on problems which are relevant to them, because they don't have teams of people working already on the problem.
Because I think one thing, I don't know if this is just Korea, but one difficulty that I see in establishing, let's say, an industrial, like mathematical center or something of that kind in Korea is to have meaningful set of problems. The problems have to be provided by corporations, by companies, but they seem to be bored to deal with that in-house.
Yes, but at the same time, I mean, the vast majority of hard math problems that a company has, it doesn't even recognize as math problems. I mean, it's the fellow cutting down the tree with the axe and the chainsaw thing again. So a lot of this one.
Yeah.
Oh, how about that? I mean, a lot of the times, and this was the discussion this morning about sorting out the confused logic and all the rest is most of the time, and this is what makes real industrial math problems hard, is they're almost always masquerading as something else. You've got a supplier management problem, or you've got a production issue out on the factory. I mean, I know in the early days of the 787 program, we had this problem joining the wings to the body. And if you looked at what the problem was, it was a problem of manufacturing shims that fit properly. So you had to dry fit the wings in the body, get out your laser measurement devices, measure what was going on, pull everything back out, and then quickly manufacture some shims and then piece the whole thing together. Well, nobody involved in this effort is expecting that there's going to be this mathematical solution to this problem that's going to shave a whole day off the 787 manufacturing cycle, and yet that's how it turned up.
One thing I wanted to add is I think we need to attack the problem at every front. So there's going to be a lot of situations in which there's going to be workshops with toy problems. There's going to be mostly education, and there are going to be situations in which small companies are going to need real solutions. We had one case this past summer of a fairly small company in Minneapolis that they wanted to investigate studying some data that they needed to study,
And we had a postdoc who was not industrial postdoc, was related to the annual program, but she wanted to have an internship experience, and that was a perfect match. IP issues were not easy, but they were sorted out, and she spent a couple of months in the company, and they went down with this research project, which didn't solve the problem. They were not expecting to solve the problem, but they gave them ideas of what could be done to solve this problem.
So for instance, we got a project from an insurance company, and it was about car insurance, and it was a strategy on figuring out which are the risky policies and which are not, and there was a pool of state-owned policies where you could dump the riskier ones. So it was a strategy on how to handle their policies, and we didn't really understand how valuable it was for the company, but anyway, the following year the company saved $3 million. Unfortunately, we signed some agreements at the beginning that we didn't get anything from that money. On the other hand, we got many projects the years after because the company was really happy.
Yeah, but at least in the beginning, I mean, as Thomas accurately, precisely said, it's very difficult to show, chainsaw to someone who is so occupied with the axe.
I have a different question. Something I struggle with at Honeywell is how do I communicate activities going on in the IMA or possibly potentially other institutes to all the right people in the company. And in some cases, so in Boeing, you have a applied math group, and presumably that's the audience. But if there isn't such a group, the people are dispersed across the company. Do you have suggestions a little bit more on the academic side, or maybe Boeing, there are other people? How do you reach out to all the people who could benefit from some of these collaborative opportunities that centers like have represented here on?
I think it's networking. You just got to start asking people, and they may send you to someone else. You may not end up with this person you started with, but I don't know of another way.
How do you organize a project? I mean, if you have written a project, how do you, how do you organize people? I mean, which kind of experts you need? You talk about multiple times about applied mathematics. Which fields of applied mathematics?
I think it depends on where the networking takes you. So in some years, we've had problems at these MPI workshops where we don't have anyone, say, at Delaware, or maybe not even among the few places that it rotates around. And so one year we had an optimization problem, essentially. So we just started emailing people that we knew and not too far away and said, can you come and help us with this problem? We'll pay some of your expenses. And they come and they'll work for food, essentially. But so. Yeah, you can. Yeah, but I think in that case, your expectation, you should set expectations properly. That if someone wants a well-written, finely tuned code at the end of a one-week workshop, that's probably not the right expectation, right? So riffing on your thought a little bit is if, for example, NIMS wants to actually be a conduit for that to happen, why could you not find contacts and say, tell us your problem, or some representative form of your problem, and I'll turn it into a contest, and in 2 weeks we'll see what we got. I mean, that's another option, I think.
No, one of the reasons, and I didn't say that, we started the Center for Industrial Mathematics and Statistics at WPI was because we're doing these projects. I was doing a project, several projects with a company that was now acquired by Siemens. It was a local company, and a couple of other colleagues were doing projects in their own field. And the R&D person from Siemens came to me and he said, I really want to be connected to more people in your department, in your university, not just with you, because today I have a project for you, but tomorrow I might have a project for statistics or something different. And that's why we came up with a center, because that was kind of the place where R&D people could connect to a group that is more diverse than just one faculty.
Failures.
Oh, they never have.
I think most of the time the challenge is the time frame. Universities have a different time than companies have. And so fitting things in semesters or year-long projects is sometimes complicated for the company. So that's one thing. The other thing is the intellectual property agreements that you have to sign, the non-disclosure agreements that you have to sign. We really want our students to be able to publish at some point, even if it is not this year, but in 2 years. There has to be a deadline from which students could publish something, with the agreement of the company, of course, but no. And so if a company comes and says, no, you can never publish that, then that's not good for the faculty, it's not good for the students. We are measured in publications in academia, so.
I'll give you 2 examples of dirty laundry. So one is, yeah, okay, thank you for that. So in one example, at the Delaware version, or the MPI version that rotates around, we had someone who brought a problem for a surfing ship. So he wanted a ship that could cross the Atlantic. It wasn't clear in the beginning that this is what he really wanted, but it became clear right away that what he really wanted was a ship that could generate its own tidal wave and ride across the Atlantic very rapidly. And the question might arise, well, what happens when you get near land? That would be one question, among many others. So a jet-powered missile floating on water, basically. So needless to say, that one did not end too well. And the vetting the problem and the scale of the problem appropriate for the workshop was a big issue there. So that was one big thing. And a similar related issue in a 10-day version of the workshops that happened was we had a company that wanted to mine potash, and there's a giant potash deposits in Canada, underground, not very deep, and the idea was to basically turn on a giant fire hose and wash out the potash. It would just follow the deposits and wash it out, and we collect it in. So there's a lot of fluid mechanics issues and various really difficult aspects of that problem. The presenter had a very fixed picture in his mind about how this would work and what would happen. And he was going to really force the students essentially to fit his vision of this problem. So that ended up being it wasn't a happy outcome, I would say. So again, it was more to do with vetting, where did the person want to go, and setting expectations. So that's a primary thing that has to happen from whoever hosting institution happens. Not easy to do it. There are times you can't guarantee it. So you live with what you get.
One thing that, so they're all talking about the workshop type engagement and also the undergrad. At the IMA, we have the industrial postdocs where we hire the postdocs for 2 years, and they work on the project with industry, usually at a half-time basis. Sometimes they spend the first year at the industry side, then the second year with us. What is important for us, we discovered, is that wherever they are, where they got the project, there should be somebody there who can mentor them, who cares about the outcome of that research. We have one situation where they hired postdoc. The person who was at the company actually was let go, and this postdoc was just sort of left on the lurch looking for projects, and eventually came back to us really discouraged about what was going on. Nobody really wanted to pick him up to work with him. So that it's very important that when you create a project with industry that somebody over there really cares about the outcome of what you do. If they don't, it's not going to work out. Somebody who also cares about mentoring the student, showing him some direction, that maybe even teaching him some interpersonal skills that will allow him to survive in the company.
Yeah, I mean, but that goes both ways too. I mean, there was one project I was involved in. Ali knows this one very well, where there was a presentation of what the problem was. This was an entire academic year-long project. The presentation of the project, of the problem at the beginning of the professor advising this group of students said, "Oh, okay, we got it from here," and off they went for the entire school year. And I got to see this at the end. Well, it had morphed into what may have been an interesting math problem, but one which had no bearing on the actual industrial problem that it had in. So there have to be people on both sides that care about the outcome.
So last chance, any last minute questions? Going, gone. Okay, so we will meet again at 3:40 to begin Iraj Shani stuff.